Mr. Trump leading. Scott Jennings, who did political analysis for the George W. Bush White House, joins me now from Louisville, Kentucky. Scott, as you watch these polls and others, what's on your mind tonight?
Well, what's on my mind is that the race is moving towards Hillary Clinton. We've seen a couple of surveys that are going into that national polling average that Trump had been relying on to help buoy his numbers start to move against him. The USC LA Times poll is now showing a tie. We've spoken of it before. It's been very pro-Trump. Rasmussen now has Hillary Clinton leading by 4. That's been friendlier to Trump as well. So right now, the national polling average is moving against Trump, and we're seeing that also play out in some battleground states.
Yeah, we don't really have much of a set of polls that are post-debate, do we? So I suppose the Trump team can hope that when the debates are out and all the sample was taken after the debate, that he might do a little better.
Yeah, there's some people talking about the final night of the NBC News Wall Street Journal survey. There were 200 interviews conducted the night after the debate, which showed Hillary Clinton with just a 2-point lead. So there are some people that are waiting to see if more nights post-debate will help Trump. He needs the help, and he needs it among Republicans. Right now in the Reuters Ipsos national survey, he's just at 77% of his own party. Interestingly, Hillary was only at 79% of her own party. She was up 7 in that survey. So both candidates, I think, are dealing with things in the news that are hurting them with the most partisan pieces of their base.
Yeah, it looks as if Trump is suffering from, obviously, that tape, and she's suffering from WikiLeaks, right?
That's exactly right. Yeah, she's got some things in the WikiLeaks situation that are definitely hurting her with some of the more liberal elements of the Democratic Party. And so if you're Donald Trump right now, getting the Republicans back up to somewhere near 90% and trying to find a way to hold Hillary into the 70s or low 80s among Democrats would be a good strategy. There's not a lot of time left to do that. People are casting ballots in Ohio and other places, but that's one way to look at it tonight for the Trump campaign.
And when you think about that, Scott, it suggests that Trump can't maybe thinking just as you are about this, because he keeps on pounding away at her when he's not pounding away at his fellow Republicans in such a way that it doesn't appear at this point, at least, that he's trying to build a lot of support for his own programs and his own ideas as much as it is that he's trying to tear away at her support.
That's exactly right. Trying to tear down her numbers among Democrats and also running against Washington. I mean, a lot of people are making hay about his attacking Washington Republicans, but Washington isn't terribly popular among voters right now. My suspicion is he's doing what he thinks he has to do to go down the only path available to him, and that's run as the pure anti-Washington outsider, even if it means attacking people in his own party. He's trying to survive the tape. He's trying to survive the onslaught of negative ads from Hillary, and he's doing it by attacking Washington. And if you look at the numbers, of course, Washington's not that popular, so we'll see if it works.
In the meantime, of course, she's campaigning sort of as you would expect in the battleground states. She seems to be making the kind of speeches she's been making, and she's sort of carrying on business as usual. Does that look like to you a wise strategy on her part?
Yeah, college basketball fans know this as the four corners offense. It's boring, and it's a gambit to try to just hold on to a lead late in a game. The problem is so few people view her as honest and trustworthy. So few people actually want her to be the president that it strikes me she needs to press the advantage a little bit more than she is. She's never been very good with a lead. She lost a lead against Obama in 2008. She lost a lead against Sanders in this primary, and she's lost leads before to Trump in this general election. So not pressing her own program aggressively and not being aggressive with Trump may come back to haunt her, especially when you consider that she's lost some support in some polls among Democrats that have come out since the debate.
Scott, as always, thank you very much. Donald Trump clearly has not slowed down in his battle with the GOP. He has even said he does not care about House Speaker Paul Ryan's support. Doesn't Trump need to keep the Republican Party united behind him, or at least get them behind him? Joining me now to give his thoughts on this wild 2016 election is former John Boehner, former Speaker of the House of Representatives. Mr. Speaker, nice to see you, sir.
Good to be with you.
How would you like to be in your old job right now?
No, thanks. It's a hard job.
Why?
Well, Paul Ryan's in a very difficult spot. But he's the leader of the majority party. And if the Republicans aren't the majority of the party anymore, then he's not the speaker. And so Paul is looking out for his members, trying to help them do whatever they need to do to get elected in this crazy political season that we're in.
Now, he's not withdrawn his endorsement of Donald Trump, but he did react pretty strongly when that vulgar videotape hit last week. When you saw that and saw what was in it, what was your reaction as to how this would play with the public at large?
Well, I was disgusted by it. I thought most Americans would be disgusted by it. And frankly, I'm a little surprised that more people aren't disgusted by it.
So your view was this was dynamite?
I thought it was dynamite. I thought it was real bad. And, you know, you can't defend it. And frankly, Donald Trump isn't even trying to defend it. Listen, in my view, the election is pretty simple. The legislative process, the political process in Washington is at a standstill and will be regardless of who wins. And the only thing that really matters over the next 4 years or 8 years is who's going to appoint the next Supreme Court nominees. I just believe that the next president's going to appoint 2, 3, maybe 4 justices to the Supreme Court and all throughout the federal court system. Because more and more issues, because they can't be dealt with legislatively, are going to end up in the court system. And so I believe that Donald Trump's view of who these judges should be is much closer to where I am than the judges that Hillary Clinton would appoint.
So you plan to vote for Trump?
I'm going to vote for him.
And his seeming lack of knowledge about so much of what the president's involved doesn't bother you?
There's a lot of things that I disagree with Donald on. But as I said, the most important thing about this election is who these judges are going to be appointed. We have to understand, you know, Supreme Court justices today are going to serve 20, 30, 40 years. The biggest impact any president will have on American society and on American economy is who's on that court.
Now, as you look out across the land, knowing the districts as you do from having campaigned with so many of the Republican members and others, what is your sense about the chances of holding on to the House?
I think we'll hold on to the House. We've got about a 30-seat majority in the House. But there are, you know, about 10 members who sit in seats that were won by Barack Obama. Those were always going to be tough seats to hold on to. They're probably still going to be tough seats to hold on to. But given this election cycle, I think we're going to see more ticket splitting than we've ever seen in an election, where people typically would go in, vote for president, and may not even vote in the congressional race. I know in my last election, and almost all my elections, in a presidential year, about 10% of the people who voted for president didn't even bother to vote down the ballot. But this time it might be a little different.
You say that because people are conscious of this?
People are very conscious that, all right, we've got these two candidates. They may like one or the other, or not like either one of them, where most Americans are, but realize that voting for this in the Senate race and the congressional race are really important.
Now, what happens if, in your judgment, if more of this sort of crude stuff comes out, as a lot of people think it will, before Election Day? Does that change your calculus at all?
Listen, we've got 27 days. Anybody thinks that we've seen everything we're going to see, I think they're kidding themselves. On both sides. I don't know what WikiLeaks or anybody else is going to throw out from the other against Mrs. Clinton, or what may come out against Mr. Trump. But what more could be said in this election cycle than has already been said?
So you seem to think that we kind of already know what Donald Trump is all about, and that nothing further could come out that would make any difference?
Well, it can't be worse, could it?
Well, that's a good question. What do you think?
I don't think so. But again, I'll just get back to the point I've made. The legislative process is not going to function very well.
Even if he's elected and
the
Republicans control both houses?
Both of these candidates for president have painted themselves into a pretty far corner. And their ability to move beyond the people who elected them, to work toward the middle to get things done, I think is going to be severely tested. And so you're going to see more and more issues in our society end up in the court system and eventually end up in the Supreme Court. And that's where the real action is going to be.
Mr. Speaker, good to see you, sir.
Nice
Thank you very much for coming in.
Thank you.
So, as you heard, the Boehner argument is that no matter who wins, it's going to be legislative gridlock in Washington, and the courts will therefore be more important than ever, so he's sticking with Donald Trump. By the way, before this broadcast is over, we will show you a fresh information about yet another woman or two women who have come forward to say that Donald Trump behaved inappropriately toward them, inappropriate touching. We'll have more about that shortly. In the meantime, what does our nightly political panel think about the Boehner argument? Here with us, Guy Benson, political editor at townhall.com, and Nina Easton of Fortune magazine. Well, Nina, what do you think of the Boehner argument that this is the case for Trump?
Well, I think it goes to this conundrum that we've all had about why social conservatives aren't defecting from Donald Trump despite the vulgarity and the Access Hollywood tape and all the kind of horrible stuff we've seen coming out of him. Values voters in particular really do view the court as a reason to stay with Donald Trump for all the reasons that Boehner suggested. We've got, just you look at it now, we've got one opening because of the late Scalia. We've got 3 Supreme Court justices, Stephen Breyer, Anthony Kennedy, and Ruth Bader Ginsburg, who are in their 80s or about to be in their 80s. So that's 3 openings right there. You've got hundreds of federal court positions to fill. So for them, you know, if that's what you really care about, if that's at the top of your list, that has an impact on you. And he knows it. Trump knows this. He's released 2 lists now of Supreme Court candidates to fill those positions. So he's played to that base.
Okay.
I wasn't surprised to see Boehner standing by Donald Trump. I mean, Boehner's a part of the establishment. Much of the establishment lined up behind Donald Trump.
But he's freer now than he's ever been.
He is.
And you could tell I could tell just from the body language that he's very glad he's not in that job now. You heard what he said when I asked him that question.
Happy-looking man on that count for sure. But he's also someone who called Ted Cruz Lucifer, you know, towards the end of the campaign.
Well, he had a lot of dealings with
he did. So anyway, the establishment in many cases actually backs Donald Trump. I think that's one misunderstanding. But as for the court argument, I think it is the best conservative case to make for staying with Donald Trump and supporting Donald Trump. And no one could have really framed it any better than Hillary Clinton at the debate on Sunday night. She was asked about the Supreme Court, and she gave her top priority. She said, I want to overturn Citizens United, which would restrict the First Amendment. By the way, she did not mention the Constitution once in this response. And that, by the way, would have banned a film. That case was about the banning of a film critical of her, something that she never mentions. She talked about abortion, sacrosanct right, so-called right in her mind. She has a very radical position on that issue. And then she also went after gay marriage and saying we must protect this gay marriage decision, which is very interesting coming from her. This is a new priority for her, given that she was opposed to gay marriage for almost her entire life until very recently. There were a lot of reasons in that answer alone that I think would give conservatives reason to say this is a woman who has to be defeated.
And what do you guys now think? Just you heard the discussion about the current polling. There's a poll out tonight in Utah, which has the race in Utah, bright blue Utah, now is a tie between Trump and Clinton at about 26%, and Evan McMullin, the largely unheard of third party, or some might even say fourth party candidate, who is a Mormon and is familiar to the voters out there, is at 22%, as you can see in that poll. Utah, wow.
Utah's been an interesting state in all of this because Mormons have, during the primary season, of course, had a lot of trouble supporting Trump. I mean, there's a lot of concern among Mormons.
But he was way up there not long ago.
But he was way up there, and it is an interesting state to watch. It was interesting, the other polls that came out, by the way, it's interesting that the LA Times poll, which has always been this very strange outlier showing a lead by Donald Trump, is now a tie. So, and of course, other polls are showing a lead by Hillary Clinton, some more substantial than others.
You know what struck me about the Utah poll? If you take Evan McMullin and Gary Johnson and combine their support, that would lead either of the major party nominees by double digits. And so you think about why, if this poll is remotely correct, why might that be? I think the answer is, I've been to Utah a few times. People from Utah tend to be honest, decent people.
Yeah.
And for those reasons, they're not very big fans of Hillary Clinton or Donald Trump, who is dishonest and indecent, respectively.
Yeah, right. Panel, as we said, there's a brand new report from the New York Times that could shake up this already rocky 2016 election. 2 women have now come forward to the Times and said that Donald Trump touched them inappropriately. One of the women, Rachel Crooks, was 22 years old in 2005 when she says she met Donald Trump in Trump Tower. But after they shook hands, Crooks says Trump, quote, kissed me directly on the mouth, end quote. She went on to tell the Times that, quote, it was so inappropriate. I was so upset that he thought I was so insignificant that he could do that. The other woman, Jessica Leeds, says Trump assaulted her while sitting next to him on an airplane in the 1980s. She described the incident to the New York Times. Watch.
It was a real shock when all of a sudden his hands were all over me. He started encroaching on my space. And I hesitate to use this expression, but I'm going to. And that is, he was like an octopus. It was like he had 6 arms. He was all over the place. And if he had stuck with the upper part of the body, I might not have gotten that upset. But it's when he started putting his hand up my skirt. And that was it. That was it.
She says she moved back. She had been invited to come up and sit in first class. She said she went back to coach and stayed there for the rest of the flight. And there are people who apparently she told this story to contemporaneously. Folks, if you saw that perhaps for the first time on this broadcast, but I guarantee you that piece of video is going to be ricocheting all across the country, and it'll be everywhere within 24 hours or less. So what effect, panel? Guy?
Well, we were told there was more to come. Ben Carson, a top surrogate for Donald Trump, said there's probably more. Donald Trump seemed to even concede on the stump. If they come out with more stuff against me, I'll go harder against Bill Clinton. That is a very difficult video to watch. Hearing a woman describe being assaulted that way. And now, if she told people at the time that this happened, that lends credence and credibility to what she said. If Trump wants to deny it, that's his prerogative. We'll see how that plays out. The problem is, politically, regardless of whether she's telling the truth or not, who knows, I'm not going to say she's lying. But even if she is, Donald Trump's audio clip that we've all heard for the last week or so describes precisely that sort of behavior. And now to have a woman come out with some credibility to say, yes, he did exactly that to me, when Trump said at the debate, no, I've never actually behaved that way. Those were only words. Problem for Donald Trump.
Well, I will put money on what I predict Donald Trump will do in reaction to this, which is to release the Juanita Broderick interview from the 1990s with NBC, making that case against Bill Clinton. So I think that that's how he's going to go after this. But it's clear, I mean, Guy's right. This is the Access Hollywood. If you argue that that was locker room talk, it's all talk, it was inappropriate, but it's talk. This shows that the talk was reality.
I should point out, by the way, that Trump is quoted in that article the Times put out just a short time ago as denying that this ever happened. Yeah,
and I shouldn't say, this is a woman's, this is her perspective on it. So I shouldn't have said that it was definitely reality. He's going to argue against it. But if there's contemporaneous people backing up her story, that makes it much more believable. It does. So I think we're going to have a drip, drip, drip of these kinds of tapes coming out to counter the WikiLeaks.
So if you're a Republican politician and you so far decided you're sticking with Trump, is this something that would make you change your mind, or was it going to take more, or you're all in now and it's too late?
There's a lot of Republicans who are kind of since Access Hollywood, since the debate, are still taking a wait and see attitude before they jump ship. And so I think as this stuff builds, you could see more jumping ship.
Guy, Nina, thank you. Stick with us. Revelations these days are not only about Donald Trump. The WikiLeaks email dump has left a trove of information about the Clinton campaign. That includes possible coziness with the Department of Justice and shots at Catholics and evangelicals and others. We dive into those emails next. The deplorables. It appears people in her campaign also harbor some negative attitudes toward other groups within the electorate. Those attitudes emerged from the latest dump of WikiLeaks campaign emails. Fox News correspondent Ed Henry reports.
In a move aimed at firing up conservatives, Republican Donald Trump jumped on new evidence that advisors to Hillary Clinton trashed faith-based voters. Fresh emails released by WikiLeaks showing Clinton campaign chairman John Podesta traded messages that slammed conservative Catholics and evangelicals.
She did a big number on Catholics, horrible number on Catholics. She did a horrible number on evangelicals through her people.
In one email, liberal activist Sandy Newman writes to Podesta, there needs to be a Catholic spring in which Catholics themselves demand the end of a Middle Ages dictatorship and the beginning of a little democracy and respect for gender equality in the Catholic Church. Podesta responded, quote, "We created Catholics in Alliance for the common good to organize for a moment like this, but I think it lacks the leadership to do so now. Like most spring movements, I think this one will have to be bottom up." Another Democrat sent a 2011 email to Podesta and current Clinton campaign communications director Jennifer Palmieri, mocking Rupert Murdoch, executive chairman of Fox News Channel and a longtime associate, for raising their children as Catholics. John Halpin of the liberal Center for American Progress writing, "It's an amazing bastardization of the faith. They must be attracted to the systematic thought and severely backwards gender relations and must be totally unaware of Christian democracy." Palmieri jumped in writing, quote, "I imagine they think it is the most socially acceptable, politically conservative religion. Their rich friends wouldn't understand if they became evangelicals."
I'm a Catholic. I don't recognize that email that we saw. And this whole effort is led by the Russians. The Russians, ones that orchestrated this hack.
WikiLeaks, however, does not have a track record of altering documents. And today, the Trump campaign organized Catholic leaders like former U.S. Ambassador to the Vatican, Jim Nicholson, to demand Palmieri be forced out.
It sort of left me gasping to hear them say these things in such a callous, disdainful way about me, about my family, about 75 million Americans.
Indeed, Catholics make up 25% of the electorate. And a recent poll by PRRI and The Atlantic magazine found among likely Catholic voters, Clinton has a 21-point lead. Yet the Trump camp believes they can change that amid a growing series of elitist comments, including this from former President Bill Clinton.
The other guy's base is what I grew up in. You know, I'm basically your standard redneck.
Which did not sit well with Dr. Ben Carson.
I know a lot of people who are not rednecks who are ardent Trump supporters, including yours truly. So I don't think I'm a redneck.
While Trump's running mate, Mike Pence, used a speech at Liberty University to declare the anti-Catholic rhetoric is worse than Hillary Clinton's own crack about a basket of deplorables.
Hillary Clinton should denounce those bigoted, anti-Catholic, anti-evangelical remarks, and her campaign staff should apologize to people of faith and do it now.
Now, Pence also invoked the fact that his Democratic counterpart, Tim Kaine, is Catholic, to say that people of faith need to rise up about this. Pence admitting evangelicals are not overly excited about Trump, but he said, quote, "Shortcomings are no excuse for inaction." So the bottom line, Brit, it's clear the Trump camp, which is trailing right now, sees an opening here, and they think this is going to fire up conservative voters.
Okay, Ed, thank you very much. More emails from that WikiLeaks dump seem to show an unusual level of cooperation between the Hillary Clinton camp and the Department of Justice. Fox News chief legal correspondent Shannon Bream is here. Shannon?
Well, Brit, as the trickle of WikiLeaks materials continues, the allegations of impropriety involving the Clintons and their associates grow. Emails attributed to Brian Fallon, Clinton press secretary and former Justice Department spokesman, reportedly show he was given a heads up about something critical to the investigation into whether Hillary Clinton mishandled classified information by an unidentified DOJ employee on the night of May 18th, 2015. Quote, "Hey, Brian, this was filed tonight." 14 minutes later, Fallon emailed Clinton confidant Cheryl Mills. DOJ just filed a briefing saying the government proposes releasing HRC's cache of work-related emails in January 2016. And now, along with battling the appearance of potential coordination with the DOJ during its ongoing investigation, there are also emails linked to the Clinton Foundation. In December 2011, an email WikiLeaks attributes to Chelsea Clinton shows her serious concerns about a private firm run by Doug Band, a top aide to former President Clinton and Clinton Foundation officer. Chelsea wrote that her father would be, quote, "horrified by the way the firm was drumming up business overseas using the Clinton name." The Clinton campaign has repeatedly denied there was ever any pay for play connected to her time as Secretary of State.
There was no quid pro quo or anything like that here.
No evidence of any behavior, any relations with the Clinton Foundation that weren't completely above board. And in this case, it's likely that what they were dealing with during many of these calls was the immediate aftermath of the Haiti earthquake.
But the Trump campaign is not missing the chance to go back and revisit that issue of pay to play. Here's a bit of a new ad along those lines.
Pay-to-play politics. Staggering amounts of cash poured into the Clinton Foundation from criminals, dictators, countries that hate America.
The Clinton campaign goes on to say that it has not gone through all these emails. It's not verifying what's legitimate and what's not. But, Brit, we're also seeing a lot of non-denials about many of these conversations.
They keep saying they're from Russia. The Russians did this, but they're never saying that the Russians did this and they're fake, right?
We haven't heard that yet.
Okay, Shannon, thanks very much. New information out about 2 women accusing Donald Trump of harassment. Donald Trump just responded. Carl Cameron reports on that next. Stay tuned.
It's the Phillips lady. Anyone?
2 women have come forward and said Donald Trump touched them inappropriately. In that New York Times article, Trump denied the allegations, and the campaign has now just responded to that article. Fox's campaign, Carl Cameron, is in Lakeland, Florida with the campaign. Carl, what's the campaign saying?
Well, it's a breaking story here, Brit, and they just have released this statement, and it goes like this. This entire article is fiction. And for the New York Times to launch a completely false, coordinated character assassination against Mr. Trump on a topic like this is dangerous. To reach back decades in an attempt to smear Mr. Trump trivializes sexual assault, and it sets a new low for where the media is willing to go in its efforts to determine this election. It is absurd to think that one of the most recognizable business leaders on the planet, with a strong record of empowering women in his companies, would do the things alleged in this story. And for this to only become public decades later in the final month of the campaign for president should say it all. The statement continues to say, further, the Times story buries the pro-Clinton financial and social media activity on behalf of Hillary Clinton's candidacy, reinforcing that this truly is nothing more than a political attack. This is a sad day for the Times, and that is from Jason Miller, the communications director for the Trump campaign. Brit?
Carl, is it anticipated that Mr. Trump himself will have anything to say about this or not?
Well, at some point he's going to have to. He almost daily, sometimes 2 or 3 times a day, calls the media collectively dishonest. And one of the things that they are likely to point out is that these 2 women allege that these gropings, if you will, happened in fairly public places. And one would have to envision that 2 people in first class of an airplane, one could be groped by the other, and there might not be a commotion about that, or that one man would start kissing aggressively a woman outside of an elevator in a fairly traffic building would also go unnoticed. But it is 30 years ago, and we're given to believe that there are perhaps more of these types of allegations to come, and the fact that the press is digging in on them certainly gives rise to the Trump campaign's argument that the media is collectively against him, when in fact it could simply be looking after the facts. But the Trump campaign knows that there's likely to be more of this. They've actually suggested that there would be attempts further to discredit his candidacy and that they should be seen through that political prism.
I'm already seeing questions from some viewers about how such a thing could have happened in the first class cabin of an airplane when there's usually a rather large armrest between the two seats of people side by side. The woman in that in the tape said, and it wasn't in the part that we aired, said that the armrest between them had mysteriously disappeared. The kinds of armrests that I'm accustomed to seeing on those airplanes don't mysteriously disappear. The ones in coach you can roll back up. So it could be that the Trump camp has a point about the impracticability of such an assault.
And these types of he said, she said, and we don't want to be disrespectful to potential victims, do have the potential over years to get a little bit fuzzy. And frankly, though occasionally traveling around in the country chasing political candidates, I fly in first class, I couldn't vouch for what the armrests were like 25, 30 years ago myself.
Yeah, good point, Carl. All right. Carl, thanks very much. Well, Donald Trump is in Florida. Hillary Clinton spent most of her day in another swing state, Colorado. And Fox News senior political correspondent Mike Emanuel is in Pueblo, Colorado, where Clinton held an event earlier today. Mike?
Brit, good evening. Hillary Clinton pushed her supporters here in battleground Colorado to get their ballots in early ahead of Election Day. Clinton campaigned in front of a large and vocal crowd here in Pueblo and reminisced a bit about campaigning here 24 years ago when her husband was the Democratic nominee. Clinton blasted Donald Trump for what she called his scorched earth strategy.
Now that just shows how desperate they are. That's all they have left. Pure negativity, pessimism, and we're not going to let Donald Trump get away with it, are we?
The Real Clear Politics average of recent polls here in the Centennial State reveals Clinton with a 7.3-point edge over Donald Trump. Clinton 44.3, Trump 37. And with that comes growing confidence for the Democratic nominee and her allies. Her top super PAC, Priorities USA, is looking at shifting money from the presidential race to battleground Senate races. On the flight here, Clinton's communications director told us they aren't jumping the gun.
We are not at all overly confident. We are, this has been a very volatile race, and we're running against a very volatile candidate. And you'll see, obviously, we're working really hard, not just in the existing battleground states, but to see if there's more that we should be doing.
Yet there is growing evidence of Clinton trying to pull out a Democratic majority in the United States Senate. Clinton is expected to talk about the race in battleground Nevada at an event in Las Vegas tonight. Brit?
Mike, thanks very much. I'm sure you know at least someone who has done yoga before, but according to one college, it may be yet another incorrect activity. Our Campus Craziness segment is next. Wide warning to students about potentially offensive Halloween costumes. The warning, which is now available on the university's website, says, quote, some Halloween costumes reinforce stereotypes of particular races, genders, cultures, or religions. And, quote, regardless of the intent, these costumes can perpetuate negative stereotypes, causing harm and offense to groups of people. The university also set up a 24/7 hotline for students to call if they want to report instances of bias. The statement goes on to note that the school's official, quote, bias and education response team is ready to educate students who wear something deemed offensive. A student at Tufts University in Massachusetts came under attack for his proposal to promote free speech on campus. Sophomore Jake Goldberg proposed a free speech resolution that it simply sought to reaffirm students' First Amendment rights. According to social media posts published by the College Fix, some students lashed out at Goldberg. One post referred to him as simply meninist scum. Meninist is a play on the word feminist. In private emails also published by the College Fix, students told Goldberg to F off, didn't say F. Some students even demanded that he release a list of students who supported the free speech petition, presumably so those could be targeted as well. You might think campus craziness is bad at American universities, but one Canadian student says that things are much worse north of the border. Josh Eisen, a student at the University of Western Ontario, took his grievances to the website The Daily Caller. In his article, Eisen cites numerous examples of campus craziness at his school. One such example was the university's recent reaction to a banner on campus that said, Western Lives Matter. The university, which goes by the name Western, released a statement that said, quote, Western does not tolerate racism, and launched a police investigation to see if such speech was illegal. In his article, Eisen points out that Canadian students lack First Amendment free speech protections enjoyed by American students. Fox News reached out to the University of Western Toronto, but did not get a response or comment. Barnard College in New York will host a lecture series on power, privilege, and oppression. The website Campus Reform, which covers college news, posted this image of a flyer for the lecture series. The flyer notes that one of the lectures will focus on how yoga is a form of cultural appropriation. Barnard told Fox News the program is meant to help students expose their, quote, identities and social issues. If you have a Campus Craziness story, let us know. Email and tell us about it, campuscraziness@foxnews.com. We would appreciate hearing from you. And breaking tonight, two women tell the New York Times that Donald Trump touched them inappropriately, one accuser calling it an assault. So will Trump supporters stick with him? Political panel. We'll be back shortly. Reported the New York Times has published an article featuring two women that allege Donald Trump inappropriately touched them. Trump himself has denied the allegations in the article, and his campaign just responded with a statement that reads in part, quote, "This entire article is fiction, and for the New York Times to launch a completely false, coordinated character assassination against Mr. Trump on a topic like this is, quote, dangerous." We should also point out one of these allegations is from 30 years ago. Now, with TMZ reporting today that NBC planned to hold the video until last Friday, the one we all saw last week, so they could influence the debate, it is only fair to ask if the New York Times has been holding this story. Our nightly political panel is back. I'm Benson, political editor at Town Hall. And Nina Easton of Fortune magazine. Guy, I understand that since you guys were last here in this room with me, that a couple of further allegations have surfaced.
Right. So just coming across Twitter. But it's the Palm Beach Post and Trump groped them. One, I guess, more recently. One. Saying it was 13 years ago. The woman in Palm Beach, or at least in Florida, saying this happened down in Florida and that she told friends and family at the time, and then she decided to come forward when she saw Donald Trump at the debate deny that he had ever followed through on what he described in that tape with Billy Bush. And again, none of these women, I think it's important to point out, went to the authorities at the time. The Trump people will point to that, and I think that they are right to do so. But the political problem, at the very least, that Donald Trump has is he is on tape saying this is how he treats women. This is what he does to women. And here are now 4 women today saying, indeed, that is what he did to me.
Well, compounding this, and something we haven't talked about, is the whole issue which he bragged to Howard Stern about his ability as the owner of the Miss USA pageant to wander into dressing rooms where pageants were getting dressed half naked, and we
some cases, some women have said fully naked,
and fully naked. And there are reports that came out today and yesterday that this also was the Miss Teen USA pageant, where you have girls as young as 15, and he walked in, and there are some pageant candidates on the record talking about that. So the whole swirl of this is not good for Donald Trump, but he is going to keep pushing back on it.
Well, no doubt about that, and I suspect we'll hear more from the campaign over the next 24 hours about that. Something that probably needs to be discussed here is the effect of things like this on a campaign are twofold. It is the seriousness with which the people take the allegations, but it is also the effect that allegations like this have on a campaign's ability to get out whatever other message it's trying to communicate. So when you're in the midst of one of these firestorms, and this is bound to generate another one or further the one that's already going on, you want to talk about your education plan, or your tax plan versus her tax plan, or Hillary Clinton's weaknesses on this and that. That stuff is drowned out. This is going to be what makes the news, and his response to it will make the news, right?
And it also drowns out the WikiLeaks controversy over Hillary Clinton. More people are going to understand this, relate to this, than they are about the dodging and calculating that goes on inside her campaign, or for that matter, what one of her aides might have said about Catholics. I mean, it trumps all of the stuff that might have hurt.
No pun intended.
No pun intended. No pun intended.
And isn't it a coincidence that Donald Trump's ability to get billions of dollars of uninterrupted, basically unchallenged airtime just expired as soon as the Republican primary ended? Look at just the last day. It's 4 women, 3 different news outlets. I would be astonished if the Democrats were not behind some of this. This feels coordinated. The media had some of this stuff. NBC apparently sat on the tape. Look, I'm not going to defend what Donald Trump said in that tape at all. It cannot be defended. But if NBC and TMZ reported this, if NBC and their executives had this information weeks or even months ago, and they held on to it to drop it when it had maximum electoral impact, that is not journalism.
That story also said